Welcome to Hip Hop Now Podcast. If you're from the future, you know what to do. Get your ass out of here. Don't disrespect the legend. Hip hop is here to stay. Let's get right into the business. What up, y'all? I am your host, Vegas, and this is Hip Hop Now Podcast, a bonus edition, Labor Day edition, holiday weekend edition, whatever you want to call it, of Hip Hop Now Podcast. I'm off that Henny 50 years of hip hop edition, Nas. And real quick, shout out to the Patreon supporters over at patreon.com / hip hop now. They have already seen and heard what you are witnessing now. If you would like to become a producer, support the podcast, but also have somewhat of a say in bonus episodes like this in advance of the viewing and listening public, follow the link in the description of this episode. Now, I'm not gonna hold y'all, not gonna make this difficult or extremely long, drawn out conversation about Nas and his discography, but let's just say this: Nas is on an unprecedented run in hip hop, paired with producer Hit Boy. They have put out, I believe, 5 projects together. The King's Disease trilogy, along with 2 other albums entitled Magic and Magic 2, and it's at this point in his career, it's kind of unheard of in hip hop. 50 years of hip hop at that. Fresh off the Yankee Stadium performance, like it's just time that we sit down and do this. Now, I will say, in the past, I did a Jay-Z and Nas tier list together, but I felt, considering Nas just added like 5 albums to that joint, I felt the need to come in here and do this. So as you can see, got the grid up. Now, let's break down the categories. From top to bottom is like from classic to whack. But on Hip Hop Now Podcast, well, we gave them different names. So any album in this category, that is Nasty Nas, is equivalent to calling it a classic, or just in general, his best work. Some of his best work is at the top. Next is Escobar. This may not be classic, but it's great nonetheless. The other category, Godson. With that, it's good. It's a good album. It's not bad. It's not classic. It's not the greatest, but it's good. But then we hit Khaleesi's ex-husband. That's when it's like, there's some joints on here, but overall, not that good. And lastly, there's Worst Beat Picker. Now, whatever album I put in this category, if I do, doesn't mean that the beats on that album is whack. It just means that the album is whack. Straight up and down, the album is just whack. So those are the categories. And then for those who live in the social media world, there are people out there on social media who pretend like only the top and the bottom categories exist. But there is a gray area, and it matters. It's okay if an album is good. It's okay if an album is not classic, but great. It's okay if an album is close to being whack, but not necessarily completely whack. I'm not comfortable to committing to whack. So there you have it. What we're going to do is we're going to go in order, and I'm going to use this based off of memory. So if some things fall out of line in order, leave your comments in the comment section below. Say, yo, actually, that album released before this one, but it doesn't matter. It's all about placement. So let's get right into it. Illmatic. Y'all already know. Stop playing with me. Stop playing. Nasty Nas. Why wouldn't Illmatic go there? For all the reasons that everybody tells you, besides the fact that it is the holy grail of hip hop. It was just an album and an artist and a coming together of producers that and the Source magazine stuff. It was just all perfect timing. Everything was perfect timing. Nas getting the deal and and getting into the game at this point in time with basically street poetry for real, in a way you had never heard before. Reminded you of G Rap, reminded you of Rakim, but he was something different. And he was speaking directly to streets where it was relatable, whether you were into the streets or you just lived in the hood. So Illmatic, for all the reasons, you know, the top producers at the time, you know what I'm saying, put together some of their top beats. Some of them were in competition with each other on the same album. And this is a rookie. 5 mic classic in the source when the source was the source. Come on now. Come on. So Illmatic, Nasty Nas. It was written, I ain't gonna hold y'all, Nasty Nas. There are people who didn't like the fact that he returned with Trackmasters mostly, and you know, some Havoc and stuff like that, Dr. Dre, but with Trackmasters. Some people didn't like the song If I Ruled the World as a single. But there's no way you watched the video for If I Ruled the World and saw the message, heard the snippet from the message, and said to yourself, nah, this ain't the same Nas. You're right, it's not the same Nas. He was better. He was way better lyrically on It Was Written than he was on Illmatic. He had evolved, and he evolved the game. And a lot of those beats were tough. Songs like I Gave You Power, right? Primo's still there. The Message, Shootouts, like there's some joints on there for sure. And then when you look back now, you listen, because I listened to all this just for you guys. Listen to all of it again, all of it. Uh I really felt like it was written as a classic, man. You can't deny, man, that you could get mad all you want, but Escobar Nas, in my opinion, is the best version of Nas. It was when he was at his peak lyrically, mixtape wise, album wise, feature wise. He was untouchable. So there you have it. Next up, I believe, is the Firm album. And I'm gonna go Khaleesi's ex-husband. First Firm album was a huge disappointment at the time. Dr. Dre, Jay-Z, AZ, Nas, Foxy, Cormega, and Nature, but mostly Nature, who was killing it on the mixtape circuit, featuring people like Cannabis, who was, you talk about killing it on the feature side and mixtape side. Cannabis was it. This is when he was building towards something. And he's on this album with a top tier performance. And this album is, for me at the time, was really hit or miss. They were, to me, they were trying to do too much. They were trying to be, you know, the Firm, like the movie, and a crew, and in that way, and the mafioso feeling, but you know, coming off of affirmative action on It Was Written, but then they were also trying to be a little bit of the bad boy stuff, right? Have the party records and blah blah blah. And even though I don't get me wrong, I like that joint. When I heard the album, I was like, this shouldn't have been this album. This is like too many scattered pieces that don't really fit together. You know what I mean? And you're introducing people like Wiz, who was with Bravehearts, but even though that song was dope. Same thing with Half a Mil, he was dope, but it just missed for the time. It wasn't as ill as we thought it was going to be, especially after hearing records like Phone Tap and Affirmative Action. So is it the worst? Nah. Do some people rate it higher? Of course. But for me, in this list, I kind of felt like there was some joints on there, but it's just not an album I go back to with fond memories. And when I went back to it, it was the same feelings all over again. So there you have it. Now we're gonna do something crazy right here because y'all see it down there. Y'all see it. Before we get to the next Nas release, we're gonna get to the release that never was. That's Nasty Nas. It is I Am Nastradamus, bootleg double album. You've heard the stories. There's another album on here that features some of the songs that were released to the public. The actual albums that were feature some of the songs that should have been on there. When I got a hold of the bootleg version of the double album, I Am Nastradamus, and today, and today albums really don't get leaked like that, but today they would have put it out anyway. But back then, it was like kind of back to the drawing board with a lot of it because the public already had it and they felt like, well, people already have it on bootleg, they're not going to go and buy it. But man, it should have been released in its original form because it just was look what I just did here, right? Nasty Nas section. This would have been Nas's first 3 albums. Classic, classic, classic. It would have been. But that third one got bootlegged. And Nas even talked about it on his latest project about how Nipsey wanted to do a documentary on that. I still need to see that, fam. Now, me and Tone, shout out to Tony from IntoTheDome.com and Into the Dome podcast. I have a link to an episode that we collaborated on talking about this particular album and its potential and the songs that were on there. But when I tell you, it was a instant classic from the intro fetus to the end. I am not lying. It was crazy what it did it again. And I think it really took a lot of steam or momentum out of Nas. So there you have it. But let's get into the joints that were released. And let's start with I Am. I Am is Escobar. Stop playing with me, dog. Y'all need to stop sleeping on I Am. Even though I Am Nastradamus, the bootleg, was the gold standard, I wasn't mad at I Am. I kind of like what they were able to do. There were some songs I didn't like here and there, but I kind of, going back, I was like, this album wasn't bad. It just wasn't. You know what I'm saying? Hate Me Now was on there. New York State of Mind 2, which is really underrated. I think people just forget about it. Was on there. And to me, Nas's greatest, he does a lot of storytelling, but his greatest song and forgotten song when it comes to storytelling is Undying Love. If you've never heard Undying Love, listen to that. But overall, I Am was a solid, if not great album to me. But it was the one that followed that wasn't. Nostradamus, I ain't even gonna hold y'all. Worst beat picker. This album was bad because of beats and probably hooks. And maybe in some cases concepts. Lyrically, Nas was still it. He still was in the pocket. But this just wasn't what it was supposed to be when it was a part of a double album. I think Project Window might have been the only joint from the bootleg that made this album. And most people talk about You Owe Me, but I like You Owe Me big time with Genuine, that joint. Oh, bars. There you go. But I like that joint a lot. So yeah, man, it was tough, and it felt like the end was near, or at least the fact that Nas had finally released. In most people's opinion, even though I rate I Am a little bit higher than most, but it felt like Nas was declining big time. Nostradamus just was not good. It was not good. So there you have it. Now, in between that, we got a joint that is more of a compilation, but was kind of overseen by Nas, and that's the QB's Finest compilation album. I think that's Godson. I think that was a good album. I think I like it better now than I did back then. But that was the expectations back then. But it also does feature You Want a Ball Till You Fall, I could help you with that. You want beef, I could let a slug melt in your hat. Or maybe not that, or maybe that was Nostradamus. Yeah, it was Nostradamus. But nevertheless, this is all around the same time. He talking to Bleak. This is right before we get the Axe Nas, you don't want it with Hove. And the Jay-Z and Nas battle is about to go down, around this time. But QB's Finest, if you never heard it, legends from QB on there, from Prodigy or Mobb Deep. I think Tragedy Gaddafi's on there, obviously Bravehearts and Nas and Infamous Mob, I believe. So it's really dope if you just want like a celebration of Queensbridge and hip hop on it. And it's dope because you had to have Nas on there. I mean, his chain is on the cover. So there you have it, QB. And now we get to what is probably a turning point in Nas's career. So he had already reached a low point with uh, Nostradamus. And most people felt like, Illmatic came out a long time ago. And we've been seeing the decline in some of the things we don't like. You Esco now, you wearing pink suits and videos, and you this other guy now. You're not fatigues and hoodies and stuff like that. And Jay-Z saw fit to challenge him at Summer Jam with the little jab. Then he dropped the blueprint that had to take over, and he did a full verse. And I thought it was over, y'all. I thought it was over. Thought it was over for Nas. Then Nas dropped a song called Ether on Jay-Z's birthday, and hip hop rejoiced because Nas was back. And then he dropped the album called Stillmatic. Stop playing with me. That is a nasty Nas. There's one skip for me on this album. Nas returned like he never left with Stillmatic. And he addressed not only situations with other rappers, but he even addressed fans, right? They thought I'd make another Illmatic, but it's only forward I'm moving, never backwards, stupid. Here's another classic. C notes is falling from the sky. Nas was back. Stillmatic, nasty Nas. After that, Nas say, I'm not done. Here's God's Son. More jabs at Jay-Z, more reminiscent. Now, I don't call this one classic. Well, first of all, Made You Look. Forget about it with that record. I don't call this one nasty Nas or classic because I feel like after a couple of listens, especially back in the days, and I still feel this way now, it falls off a little bit towards the end. And I know towards the end, there's a lot of sentimental stuff. He lost his mom. He's a song about his daughter, which is cool. But it starts so strong with the Nas, right? That what made you look, and what is it? The autobiography of Rakim, I believe, is on there. Just rhyme books and it was just some real hip hop joint, and it was a nice follow up to Stillmatic. But I just don't think it was on that tier. Next, we got another classic. Now, in hip hop, I don't believe this had happened before, but in like soul music, just to give you a comparison, Earth, Wind, and Fire's first best of album was so great, it's like a damn classic. It might as well be another album, even though it's a greatest hits. Well, Nas released a lot of his unreleased material that would have appeared on I Am Nastradamus and Stillmatic and all that as a joint called The Lost Tapes. And when I tell you, when this dropped, every hip hop head, every fan of Nas was playing this like it was a new album. Like, not even lying, like it was a new album unto itself because it was just so dope. But another testament to the bootleg of I Am Nastradamus, some like stuff like Blazer 50 and all of that, like it would have been on this album, man. So we're saying, but this is what's crazy. If you look at this right now, this tier list from Nas, he already got, and I know we don't want to count the bootleg, I get it, but he already got 5 albums or 5 projects in my classic category. Insane. He's a legend. Stop playing. All right. So what came after that? I think Next after that was this Streets Disciple, and Streets Disciple was Khaleesi's ex-husband. Now this hurts because I felt like this was Nas saying, I attempted to make a great double album with I Am Nastradamus. It got bootleg, but I'm gonna give it another shot. And I was ready for it. The cover looked dope, kind of represented his personality in a lot of ways with the, well, you know what's on the cover, go look it up. Um, but when I tell you, it just would have been better as a single disc, and you just took the strongest cuts and placed them on one album, you might have had another classic from Nas. But because it was a double album and there's songs that not only didn't really hit the mark back then, but also didn't age well now. Uh, that album just kind of, that double album falls short. But what was released was exactly what I just said, which is Streets Disciple, but it's all the dope songs on one album. Now, these things never really worked because Jay-Z did the same thing. And I don't think people think about, this trimmed down version releasing after the failed double album. But they're available for Blueprint 2, right? I think it's called 2.1. And the same thing for Streets Disciple from Nas. It's like this features the better song. So to me, it's the better version. But if you're a collector of music, and especially if you're a fan of Nas, you just get all of it. That's what I have. You get all of it. You listen to what you want to listen to. My favorite song off of there, just because of the bars, is Streets Disciple. I take summers off because I love winter beef. Started 87 with the Shotty and the sheep. 3/4 length beige dressed to kill. Bust a shell at the crowd. Pellets hit the ground. Nobody make a move. Everybody shut their mouth. Like, come on, man. Like, so dope. So dope. Let's not dwell on it anymore. Then after that, it felt like Nas took a break, but he definitely took a break for me because there's distant relatives, and I don't care what y'all say. I did not I did not like it. Worst beat picker. Now, you can argue, well, he's doing something different. Okay. That doesn't mean I have to like it. And what's interesting about this project, and don't get me wrong, if you're just looking at what he was doing, especially what they were talking about, okay, for what they were talking about, I'll move it up a slot, right? Positivity. We gotta award positivity in some way. It's not whack. That's why I took it out. It's not whack. But what I didn't like about it is I felt like this collaboration, this distant relatives with I think it was with Stephen Marley, if I'm not mistaken. Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think it was Damien, but if it was Damien, whatever. Um, Nevertheless, they were way more comfortable on these styles of beats as far as being in the pocket than Nas was. And when I went back and listened to see if I felt any different today, I felt the exact same. He just always he didn't sound comfortable until I heard one of the songs on there where the beat was more of like what you would hear from a Nas than a Marley. And then Nas sound completely in the pocket on that record. And to me, that told me, well, this is cool, but he's better on, on beats that aren't, reggae or any Afro beat style type joint. He just doesn't sound comfortable over those beats to me. And for me as a listener, as a Nas fan, it just didn't connect. I appreciate everything they were talking about, but for me, that's not enough, right? That's charity to say, oh, well, it's a good message, so it's a classic. Nah, man. When you in the business of entertainment, Jack, get in the pocket on those records. Okay. Uh Now after that, did I skip over something? I feel like I did, but if not, let's just keep going because I think I know. Now, when this album was announced, Hip Hop is Dead, I felt like He doing it again. Stillmatic again. Started slipping, but now it's Stillmatic time. Hip hop is dead. I just thought Nas was going to kill this. Then when it came out, I was like, I like some songs. Khaleesi's ex-husband. I really felt like, and maybe my expectations got to me, but the album is cool, but he tries a lot of different stuff on this album. And it hasn't stood up to the test of time to me as in its entirety. There's some joints on there. The joints are joints. Do not mistake. It's Nas. But at the same time, it just felt like it was going to be better and you were going to work with different people and kind of upgrade your sound. But there was a connection that was missing to me between the experiments, and some songs you just didn't need to release them, to be honest. So not a whack album, got some joints on there, but it is what it is. Also, him and Jay-Z around this time, this one really got me hyped. Him and Jay-Z around this time kind of settled their rap beef, and they did the joint Black Republicans, and Nas sound ready on that joint. But the album wasn't as good as I thought it would be. But then it was comeback season because Life is Good was dropped. And when I tell you, when I heard this, you ain't with Khalees no more. Now you really Khalees ex-husband. You know what I'm saying? You kind of found your pocket. You know what I'm saying? You find the things that people like about you. You find the melodies that work for who you are. Album cover was just dope. Like, it was perfect because this is the Nas we should hear from today. Mature Nas, still ill on the mic, still reminisce about the block, but he is where he is at this point, and Life is Good. Escobar style. It belonged there. It was just dope around that time. Then he got me hyped because he decided to make an album that I was like, if Nas ever made a conscious album with the way he puts words together, all that poetic stuff, it might be the greatest conscious record ever from a soloist. I'm not looking at PE and all that, even though Chuck D is the only one that rhymes, but I just mean his skill level, the way he puts his words together and the way he thinks about the world. If he made a conscious album, that would be crazy. So when I'm hearing he working with Dead Prez and Jay Electronica, and he gonna have a song about this, and he's gonna call it Nigger. Now, not in a way to sound cool or hip or whatever the hell, but mirror, a hip hop album that mirrored. Damn, well, I was gonna say his name, but now I'm forgetting. That mirrored Dick Gregory's book. And he got into, he ran into some issues with the title, so he decided to call it Untitled. Originally, the cover I saw was a black and white cover with Nas in a chair. Everything around him was black, and he was in a chair, and I think he had a white suit on and glasses. He was reading a book or whatever, and it said nigger, but it had the N like Nas, and I was like, yo, this might be it. This might be Nasty Nas. Called it Untitled, had to change it, decided for just a controversial cover instead of a controversial name, by having the N on his back, like he was whipped like a slave. Man, I thought this was going to be a classic. So I'm not even going to hold y'all. It's not at all. It's a worse beat picker. It is such a misstep coming off of Life is Good. There's some joints on there, and I know I said Khalees' ex-husband is one of those, and I don't know, maybe I should move it up, but this is just, when it comes to Nas's catalog, Nastradamus and Untitled are two joints I just never go back to. And both have a song or two that I like, maybe even three. But when I tell you the mixtape leading up to Untitled is better than the album, you should go find the mixtape because it's just the truth. It's probably the mixtape was what we should have got for the album. The album had songs that had nothing to do with the title, like Party, like just bad, just terrible. Let's just move on. Keep the memories. Now we get into one joint that was released. Nas became a part of this run with Kanye West releasing these like 7-song EPs. So I'm like, oh, Nas and all Kanye West, entitled Nasir, which is his name. And I'm thinking like, well, this should be hot. No, it was not. This joint was garbage. Worst beat picker, easy. And it's not because of any fault other than the fact that they didn't really collaborate with one another. So Nas's verses sound all offbeat and out of pocket, and it didn't sound like they worked together on some songs. And again, just like the others, there's 2 or 3 songs you really like, and the rest is just garbage. So I did not like that. I wasn't a fan of that, and I hated that it happened at this point in his career because again, it felt like he was declining. And that's a pattern, right? Nas started at the top, then he declined, then he bounced back, and it's a roller coaster because Lost Tapes 2 was whack also. Now you see what's happening? Nasty Nas section got a lot of classics, but the whack joint is kind of loaded up. Lost Tapes 2, there was so much hype behind this following that Nasir release that it just did not meet. Some of those records we did not need to hear. The Lost Tapes was like what you would think. These records are crazy. We can't place them on an album. What do we do with them? And that's exactly what this should have been. But when you listen to it, there was some dope records on there, but it was just so much where you just was like, I could have done without hearing that. And honestly, if you trim the fat, you could have probably released an EP instead with just the best of the cream of the crop, and people would have been on it, but it was not good. And now we're going to move into the final section, which is more current. It's the King's Disease run with Hit Boy, which has been very successful for Nas. So let's get into it. King's Disease 1. Let's just go right here with it. What we gonna do? We're gonna go Esco. We're gonna go Godson. Esco, Godson. Guess who? Godson. Esco. We're gonna go Godson. This was surprisingly good. I didn't think I was really gonna. I didn't know what to think about this collaboration between Nas and Hit Boy, but it was surprisingly good, and I wasn't over the moon about it. But I guess I was excited because they just sound good together. You know, with a producing, well, Hit Boy producing Nas, they just sound good together. So King's Disease was a testament to that, but we didn't realize that we was going to get King's Disease 2 not too long after that, and it's Escobar. We didn't realize it. We like, well, wait a minute. King's Disease 2 is even better. This is crazy. Nas was sounding even better on this joint. Lauryn Hill's on there? What? I think this one. But again, it was just kind of like, wow, this is an unprecedented run. You know, 2 albums so close. Nas doesn't release these albums like back to back like that. And then we didn't realize that we were going to get a joint called Magic, which is also Escobar. Surprise album out of nowhere. Nas and Hit Boy, Escobar, and this project felt more like, whoa, this kind of felt like old Nas. This felt like Esco Nas. And it was a shorter release, but it was pretty dope for the time. And I think there was also, you know, a surprise element to it. So it was dope. And then we heard about King's Disease 3 because it was teased. And I'm not going to hold y'all. Nasty Nas. It is the best in the trilogy. It's the best they've recorded together. Concepts, beats, beat flips. If you want the best out of the King's Disease series, that's it. It's damn near flawless. It's not flawless, but damn near. So dope. And then we thought it was over. lastly, we thought they won't take a break. No more King's Disease. Got your trilogy. Got your little surprise in Magic, and they dropped Magic 2. But this one, to me, is Khaleesi's ex-husband. It's not really bad. Just wasn't. It was just like, I think you went to the well too many times. I think that's what it felt like. Like you were in the rhythm. People were responding positively. The hype was just hyping. And now I think you brought everybody back down to earth a little bit. Because even though it may not be whack, it is an album that I don't necessarily need to hear no more. The joints I like on there are the joints I like, and that's probably what I would listen to. So there you have it. This is what I think. This is how I rate Hip Hop Now podcast rates Nas's catalog to this date. Obviously, there's rumors of a King's Disease 4. Well, not even rumors. I mean, Nas said it. And we'll see what we get from that. But I think the one takeaway when you look at all these albums from Nas throughout his career is that this is a reflection of an artist. You have your moments, and he's had, as you can see, some great moments. Just the two top sections. If you take the two top sections, there are people who don't even have a career like that up there, let alone have other attempts at doing things. And when you look at Nas, even though I have some of these albums at the bottom, from the compilations to the double albums to the collaborations with artists in another genre, conceptual albums like Hip Hop is Dead, projects late in his career, like at least Nas is going for it. You know what I'm saying? That's how you got to look at it, man. He's still here. He's released a series of albums in the 2020s, I guess you could call, that are critically acclaimed for the most part. And it doesn't matter if they don't all hit classic status. The fact is that this man, when you look at this, is just an artist that's competing to make the best work he can while he still can. So there you have it. How would you rate these albums? You can also just go to the same site and rate them yourself using my template. I love to see how other people think about them, or you can just go to the comment section wherever you get this podcast, but specifically on YouTube where you're probably watching this podcast, and rate the albums yourself. And let me know if I missed something, because I really think this is it. But you know how that goes, like, oh, you ain't got the one with him and with Chubby Checker was on the hook. Like, I don't know, dog. You put it in there. You put it in there. Okay. All right. You can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Spill, and all that good stuff at Vegas World INC. And also know you can subscribe to this podcast, whether you're listening on audio or you're watching a video on YouTube. But more important than that, hitting the like button, reviewing, and sharing with others is the way I grow my podcast. So if you enjoy this every week, you love it to death. I love when people comment in that way, but I need you to hit that like button. That helps me out. I need you to share it on your social media platform or forums, Discord, Reddit, whatever. Wherever you hang out and talk hip hop, tell people about these episodes, about this podcast. That is the most support you can do if you don't choose to join the Patreon account at patreon.com/hiphopnow. Until next time, y'all, I'm not a critic, I'm a fan. Peace.